Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 4, Episode 3, Hippocratic Oath. This episode aired October 18th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about the previous episode, which was The Visitor?
No, it was perfect. And extremely sad.
Yeah. Thanks for the tears, Star Trek. I mean,
yes.
Come on. And then Jake isn't even in this episode, and Sisko is like totally back to normal, so no harm done.
Yeah, we're all good. Okay, upon further review, I have come to the conclusion that it definitely was really the prophets messing with Sisko.
Okay.
Because Jake's wife in the episode, and you pointed this out to me, is Bajoran. And I think that is another hint that this is the prophets doing.
Well, could be. Will we find out? Does it come back up?
No, it does not come back up.
Interesting. Well, I certainly hope that Sisko is taking stock in what happened, you know? I guess if it really happened at all, and he remembers it at all. But we don't talk about it in this episode. Kind of like Bareil.
My opinion was no matter what happens or not, it could happen. And I think that was the warning to Sisko.
Yes, I agree. If he remembers, yes.
Oh, yeah. I think that's the worst part of it. I think Sisko remembers everything.
Well, if he never brings it back up, how do we know? I mean, he may have just jumped out of the way of the electricity charge.
There's lots of things in Star Trek that they never mention again. I'll just take it as canon.
Okay, fair enough. All right, should we talk about this next episode?
Absolutely.
In Quarks, Worf is keeping a close eye on an alien at the bar. He's reading about this guy whose name is Rajana Tosh, a known associate of a smuggling operation. Quark sees Worf doing this and makes a big, loud production out of it, really irritating Worf. I made a note here that Quark is not going to be Worf's new Guinan. Because, I mean, he was really buddy-buddy with Guinan, and she went out of his way to kind of relate to him, and that's not what Quark is going to be.
And Quark is also a Ferengi, and they completely lack any concept of honor.
For sure. Kira appears and chases Quark away. She tries to chat with Worf, but he's not very social. He tells her that he's sure Quark is plotting something with this known criminal. Kira agrees that Quark is always up to something. And then Worf asks the question that I have frequently asked. Why do we allow a known criminal to just do whatever he wants on the station? I feel like Worf is representing me, you know, coming from the Enterprise to this place. It's very confusing. Like, nothing is quite right.
Well, this falls under exactly what you've discussed before, which is the security here is very different from a starship.
Yes.
On top of that, it's not even a Federation station. It's Bajoran. And the final thing to note here is that nobody does anything about Quark's crimes and transgressions.
No. I think we're supposed to believe that Odo is getting something from it, and sometimes he does.
Yeah.
But frequently he does not. So it's confusing. I make this point a lot in my notes in this episode for today.
Yeah.
That somebody really should have warned Worf. You know, bring him up to speed. Let him know what's going on. Instead, they just throw him out there. And of course, he's going to be upset about how different this is from the Enterprise. We established that in the first episode, that the Enterprise was his home and he was at sea without it.
Yeah.
So of course he was going to come here expecting it to be his new home. But, oh, no, not quite the same.
Oh,
so
okay.
Somebody should have talked to him.
I have a little overanalysis here.
Okay.
Here's a possibility.
Yeah.
Klingons do not attend orientation meetings.
That's fair, and probably true. Well, Kira does tell him that Odo keeps Quark in check, and Worf says, yes, but not in prison. That was an awesome line.
And appropriate.
I would also say, just from Worf's perspective, I mean, sometimes you need to get the lay of the land a bit before you start throwing around accusations and trying to change everything. This is the trouble with an overly keen do-gooder.
Well, and also a Klingon. I don't think there's a Klingon word for subtle.
Oh, no.
I think the closest word in the Klingon language is charge in with your bat'lath, severing heads.
Probably. Well, now we go to Bashir and O'Brien in a runabout in the Gamma Quadrant. They were doing a biosurvey of a planet and are on their way back to the wormhole. They make a point of saying that they're 2 days ahead of schedule, so obviously nobody will miss them for a few days.
Yep.
Miles is complaining about Keiko not approving of him setting up a workshop in their bedroom. He's like, she's rarely even there. He says, I'm the one living there, but she thinks he's living like a bachelor and pushing her out of their quarters. Bashir says that's ridiculous because clearly by spending his free time in the bedroom, he's actually expressing a desire to be closer to her while she's gone. And Miles is like, exactly. And then he asks, why can't she be more like, pause. And I thought he was going to say Julian, but instead he says, a man. And Bashir says, oh, so you wish Keiko was a man. This annoys Miles, and he says he wishes that he were on this trip with someone else.
I think it'd be funny if Julian just replied with, are you hitting on me, Miles?
That would have been funnier. I mean, there's probably a better way to make this point, but no surprise, I guess. I agree with Keiko. Don't turn the one space we have together into a workspace full of your stuff. I wouldn't approve of that either.
My question for Miles would be, have you ever lived with a partner before?
Yeah, I mean, come on. You can't completely turn the place into your private workspace because then you're not encouraging her to come home. And I think you would want for her to want to come home.
Yeah, I think with any partnership, there's a line where your interests don't need to encroach upon all the space.
That's true. And it's not even just about a partner. I always remember when I was a kid and my brother was away at college and I took over his room and my mom was like, he won't want to come home. You know, like you've put your stuff in there and now he's not going to want to come back. I mean, that was maybe an oversimplification on her part, but that's what this made me think of. But also, I mean, come on, people, you need to talk about this stuff and compromise. And so you're right. That's part of just having a partner and living with someone.
Well, this is part of the bad writing of Miles and Keiko. It's almost like a bad sitcom at times.
Yeah, it's so frequently they fall back on tropes and stereotypes. And I would say even just there's a little bit of a stereotype here going on with Miles.
Right.
I mean, they've made him a racist about Cardassians before for a very specific reason. Don't get upset, right? Now they're making him paranoid about being gay. It's like, I don't know. That's a little reductive. It seems like Miles is intended in many cases to be a little bit less worldly, but that also makes it feel like he's a stereotype.
Right. This comes back to my point of you don't have to make the working man, Miles, ignorant.
I think it's a mistake to do that at all in Starfleet. We're supposed to be evolved past all of that. So I don't get that. I get his thing about Cardassians because that was a thing that happened to him.
Yes, he was at war. You were fighting these people. And to an extent, when you're in that situation, there is a move to dehumanize, if you like, your opponent, even if they're not human.
Yeah, and I think we see that in this episode.
Yeah. There's a good part in The Expanse where one of the characters uses a racial slur against the Belters. And James Holden says, I know you're psyching yourself up for the fight, but don't use that language. And that's how I see Miles when he uses words against the Cardassians. He's had to be in that situation, psyching yourself up for the fight. And you don't want to see these people as equals or as people. Yeah.
Is it possible that we're underestimating the writing here and that instead they're actually trying to establish something a little bit more with Miles?
Yeah.
Because this is going to come up again in this episode where, you know, he becomes very single-minded about something based on history.
Yeah.
And based on protecting himself.
Right.
Maybe that's part of it?
Oh.
I don't know.
Okay.
I might be reaching. Giving them a bit more credit, maybe.
That's kind of a big part of this podcast.
Oh, that's true. Well, some beeping interrupts their conversation anyway, as they pick up a subspace magneton pulse, which might indicate a damaged warp core from a ship in trouble. They move in for a closer look and are ultimately hit by a plasma surge, causing them to crash land on a planet. Miles seems to sit them down safely without damaging the shuttle. Though Julian complains when they get off of the shuttle, he complains that the place really smells, and I thought that was going to mean something, but it never came back up.
Red herring.
They step out of the runabout, phasers drawn, and are quickly greeted by a bunch of Jem'Hadar soldiers. And we cue the theme song.
There's a hint here with the Jem'Hadar in charge. Did you notice it?
No.
I'll bring that up in a moment.
Okay. The Jem'Hadar leader starts questioning them. Miles stays quiet, but Bashir says there are no other ships with them, but Starfleet will be looking for them soon. He also tells them that they were picking up the signal from their warp core, which irritates the leader enough to order someone to go put a dampening field on their warp engine. The Jem'Hadar dudes know a lot about their rankings and the meaning of the colors of their uniforms. The main guy is very interested to learn that Julian is a doctor. That makes him order the soldiers to bring the prisoners to their camp. So off they go.
Yeah, they initially were like, kill them all immediately.
Yes, we went from kill them all to, let's take them to camp. Back on the station, Worf and Odo are in Sisko's office where Worf is complaining about Quark. This is where I would have been my entire first month on the station. Odo says he's well aware of Quark's activities and he's already investigating, and then he excuses himself. Sisko is very calm and cool during this exchange. He knows Odo is on top of things.
Yeah.
After Odo leaves, he asks Worf about his time in security and says it must be a hard habit to break. In his very Worf way, he says, I remain vigilant. While Sisko encourages vigilance, Odo is chief of security, and he reminds Worf that his primary duty is to coordinate Starfleet activity in this sector, not to catch smugglers. Worf says he understands, and he leaves. I thought Snodgrass was the head of security.
Snodgrass is the head of Starfleet security.
Okay, so Odo is still the head of station security.
Right.
Okay.
So Sisko here is doing a little bit of his management exercises and kind of explaining to Worf his job, but I think he missed on fully explaining don't tread on Odo's toes.
Yeah, I agree. I think he should have said that, and I also think he should have said that Odo is not forthcoming about stuff that goes on. So he's probably already doing something. Maybe you should watch Odo for a while instead of Quark.
Yeah.
That's what I think was missed.
The other important thing here is I think he should have basically ordered him to work on the relationship with Odo, gain Odo's trust.
Oh, great idea. Yeah.
Odo's an important ally to Sisko, and Sisko should be pointing that out to Worf.
No, I totally agree with that. That's a leadership opportunity missed. Back on the planet, Miles and Julian are being held captive in some cave, of course.
Something important's going to happen if they're in a cave.
Julian notes the guard watching them appears nervous and distracted. They guess the Jem'Hadar soldiers are hiding out and didn't want to be found. Julian says they must need a doctor, so Miles says whatever they need, don't help them. Whatever weakens them increases our chances of getting out of here. And then the leader guy comes in and takes Julian away.
Was it just me, or is this whole scene all filmed in soft focus?
I don't know. It was very dark, certainly when they were in that cave, but then when they switched locations, then it was super bright. It was strange, yeah.
I was wondering whether that was just a video artifact or if that was actually deliberate.
So the leader takes Julian to a separate area and tells him to help with some scientific research. He tells Julian about Ketracel White, the drug the Jem'Hadar need to survive. He's surprised that Bashir knows about it. Bashir says he knows controlling the supply of this drug is how the Founders maintain control over the Jem'Hadar. Not the Founders, the soldier says. The Vorta controls the drug. They're the ones we came here to escape. This guy and his crew are trying to leave the Dominion.
So this is the first time we hear the name of the drug, Ketracel White.
I don't think we've heard Ketracel White before. We knew of the existence of the drug, but we didn't know what it was called.
Yeah. So I think the first shock here is the fact that they want to leave the Dominion.
Definitely shocking.
And this guy seems to have a mind of his own.
Definitely already something strange going on. Well, when the leader reveals they have only enough white to last 5 days, Julian assumes he wants him to synthesize a replacement drug, but that's not what he wants. They want to be completely free of the drug. He shows Julian that he doesn't have the tube and he's already able to survive without it. So then he tells him a story about crashing on this planet 3 years ago. The rest of the crew died, and he only had a few days of the drug, but when the drug ran out, he waited, but death never came. This guy's very dramatic, and he speaks with a constant whisper.
Oh, yeah.
Well, anyway, he lived there for 35 more days without the drug, so he thinks there's something about this planet that cured him.
Yeah.
But so far, it's not working. He takes Julian to a group of 4 soldiers who are suffering without the drug. He tells Julian that he knows as a Federation doctor he's trained to feel compassion for people in pain. I'm not sure you can train for compassion, but okay.
Yes, I thought that was actually kind of funny.
It would make sense that you would think that if you were a Jem'Hadar.
Yeah, I guess because they're so engineered,
Yeah.
they would naturally think if someone had empathy, that it would be something they were trained for. You couldn't just have a characteristic.
Well, there's definitely that. And there's also whoever is telling the story of the Federation. They want them to believe what they want them to believe.
So their information flow from the Vorta, as he points out,
Yeah.
will be propaganda that only suits their side.
Oh, definitely. But when they're standing in front of the soldiers, the leader says that it's going to get worse, and he asks Bashir if he'll at least try to help. And Julian says yes, but he needs Chief O'Brien's help. And then he gives the suffering men their vials of the drug. And then he quietly whispers to Julian that he's told the men that there's enough drug for 27 days, but there's really only enough for 5. That's all the time Julian has to save them. He says they'll die, but they'll kill me first for betraying them, and then they'll kill you for not saving them.
No pressure, Julian. No pressure.
So dramatic.
Now, I don't know how observant you were at the beginning, but there was a big hint when you first saw that officer, because all the other Jem'Hadar had the white tubes, and he didn't.
I did not notice the tube was missing until he pointed it out.
Yep.
Well, back on the station now, we learn the Klingons are attacking outposts along the Romulan border, even though they seemingly lost the Cardassian invasion.
I think you're wrong. They were victorious.
Yeah, Worf points out the invasion is not seen as a failure. Gowron just declared victory and returned home. Bajoran intelligence believes the Klingons are searching for weaknesses along their borders, and when they find it, they attack. Sisko says he wants a daily briefing about the Klingons' situation.
Isn't that just wonderfully Klingon?
Oh, yeah.
Gowron declares victory. We achieved all our objectives. Yeah, we can go home now.
That's right. When everyone leaves, Worf asks to speak to Odo. Quark had made arrangements to acquire a Type 4 Telonian microscanner, which is used to determine the purity of Telonian crystals. Odo finds it interesting since those crystals are illegal. Odo thanks him for the info, but when he starts to leave, Worf is like, so you're going to arrest him, right? Worf, dude, if you're waiting for Quark to be held accountable for anything, get in line, because that's not going to happen.
You're on the wrong station.
You totally are. Well, Odo dismisses him, essentially saying he'll take care of the matter. Worf is not amused.
Neither of them really seem to know how to deal with the other.
No.
Looking at this from a high level, I think there's blame to go around here. Worf does not strike me as someone who is very compromising, and Odo doesn't like to have his toes stepped on. He wants to keep everything to himself, is very cagey.
Well, Odo is definitely keeping stuff to himself, and that is normal, and now Worf will know that after this episode, which would be useful. Also, Odo might be looking at Worf as a Klingon.
Oh.
And not yet respecting him as a valued member of the crew, and I think the same is true in a similar fashion from Worf's point of view, where he's trying to look at everything as who's good and who's bad.
Yeah.
And he's used to being on the Enterprise where he knew who was good and who was bad. And here he does not know.
Yeah.
So he thinks that he's got to help root out all the problems, but he just doesn't know yet that he should trust Odo.
Yeah, I think the problem is Odo doesn't perform the job the way a Starfleet officer would.
That is correct.
This is almost a callback to season 3 where Sisko tells Odo about how Starfleet wants to get rid of him because he doesn't follow their procedures.
Yep.
I could see that exact mindset with Worf.
Every time Odo feels like his authority is questioned,
yes,
he acts out.
Yeah.
You know, he's not being quite the same jerk that he was at the beginning of season 3 because he was having some personal issues.
Well, yes.
But he's not open, and he doesn't automatically try to team with someone. He assumes that whoever a new person is when they arrive, they must be an adversary. That's just how he is. And again, someone could have told Worf that. Back to the planet again, and Julian and Miles are trying to secretly build a weapon. The head guy comes in for a report. Julian hasn't found anything helpful yet, and he gives him a speech about plants and chlorophyll, and the guy says, you have 3 days. The other soldier discovers the weapon Miles has built and accidentally fires on another one of the soldiers. They nearly kill Miles, sending him back to the cave. The injured soldier needs surgery, so he volunteers for death. He says when he's dead, there will be more white for the others.
Oh, and you get that great Jem'Hadar line. If the death of one makes the rest stronger, then he dies.
Yeah, and the leader says, we came here to be free of the drug and the Vorta, and it's time to stop living by their rules. He tells Julian to get back to work.
Wow, this guy is clearly something else.
Yeah, he has a whole different attitude about everything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, both of these guys would have been dead by now. Back on the station, Worf sneaks to the upper level of Quark's after hours to keep an eye on Quark. He waits for a long time until the smuggler finally arrives.
He's having a hard time giving up that security role, isn't he?
I know. He's still vigilant, as he said. Worf gets annoyed and goes to Odo again, saying, you're supposed to be watching the Ferengi. But Odo doesn't need someone to tell him how to do his job. I think we could have predicted that was what he was going to say.
Yeah.
But Worf is like, you aren't really doing your job at all. So this is going well.
Well, Odo points out that his job is mostly letting Quark off the hook.
Yeah, well, that's true. Odo really doesn't care about Worf's opinion, of course, and suggests that Worf focus on his own job. Now we go to Bashir, and he's scanning the leader dude, whose name we finally find out is Goranagor. He says his body is producing the exact amount of Ketracel white that he needs to survive, but he doesn't understand where it's coming from. We learn here that the guy has never seen a founder. He says to us they're almost like a myth, but everyone in the Dominion, even the Vorta, serve the founders. They're like gods to the Jem'Hadar, but our gods never talk to us, and they don't wait for us after death. They only want us to fight and die for them. That sounds right.
They're making the people who work for them see them almost as gods.
Yeah. They see themselves as gods.
That's true.
They think everyone is inferior to
Yeah.
them. And they've convinced everyone below them, in the Dominion anyway, that it's true.
Yeah, it's the Great Link, which turns out to be the Great Echo Chamber.
Exactly. Yeah, the never-ending echo chamber, because they live so long.
They just keep on repeating the same things over to themselves.
Or maybe forever.
If you shoot them with a blaster, that puts an end to them.
Or if you have the warp core hit them.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the cave, Julian is telling Miles that the leader is questioning everything about his existence. Miles doesn't really care. He figures he's probably just manipulating Julian. Julian wants to help Garanagor. He thinks the other soldiers might undergo the same change if they lose their addiction to the drug as well.
Yeah.
Miles is annoyed. He thinks Julian is reaching. It might actually be worse if they're running around the galaxy free. It's a good point.
Well,
Miles says they're killers. If they really wanted our help, they could have just asked for it instead of shooting us down and then threatening to kill us.
I think Miles is so out of line. This is a race who've been used as slaves and cannon fodder
Right.
for the founders, who present themselves basically as gods.
Yep.
They probably have no concept of asking politely.
No.
They're literally just conditioned for fighting. And it seems Miles is almost non-Star Trek cynical at this point. They're trying to do this thing with Miles of portraying him as almost narrow-minded.
From the viewer's point of view, you can look at it a little bit like that. You can look at it and think, well, they've been manufactured to be this way.
Yeah.
If they had a different choice, maybe they'd be different. Because you look at Odo. Odo had
Right.
different choices and he's different from the founders. But we haven't seen anybody yet until this Jem'Hadar who is different. So the viewer's point of view could be, hey, look what they've done to this race. Maybe if there was a different opportunity, they would behave differently.
Yeah.
A little bit like my complaint about female Ferengi, where if they don't have a choice and they don't have any power, then you can't say that they like whatever situation they're in,
Yes.
even if they say it, because they don't understand what difference they could have if they had their own ability to make decisions. So it's similar here. But from Miles's point of view, he doesn't see it that same way. What he sees is he goes into soldier mode and protection
Yes.
mode.
Yes.
And that's all that he sees. I don't know that that's necessarily him being narrow-minded as so much as it is that he is a product of his environment and a product of something not just how you grew up in your house, but
Yeah.
actually something traumatizing.
Yeah,
so
he's-
more like a reaction to PTSD.
Right. You could look at it as this is his training as a soldier and his war experience that's coming through. There's a moment later on that kind of points to that. Okay.
We're going to talk about this more.
Yeah.
Bashir here says he's in charge and he needs Miles to follow orders. He needs Miles to remove a biospectral phase discriminator from the runabout.
Yeah. Julian orders him.
Did you notice in this scene that even the stage direction shows how they're on opposite sides of this coin? Because they're looking in different directions at the end of the scene.
I didn't notice that. Nicely done. And Miles finishes the scene by saying a very formal yes, sir.
Yes.
However, I have an out from here. He could claim that Julian is making an illegal order. That, in a very real sense, Julian is giving aid and comfort to an enemy of the Federation.
It's true.
And therefore is effectively committing treason. So Miles could, I think, legitimately say, no, I'm not going to do that. You're committing an illegal act.
Yeah, I thought about that too. He could be looking at it like he's actually putting all of the Federation at danger by doing this. At the same time, I think this is a very common thing for Julian to do, and really for any Starfleet doctor to do.
Right.
Now on the runabout, Miles is clicking away on something as the Jem'Hadar soldier guarding him is asking him a bunch of questions. We see in a tiny display the words, transporter power online.
Yeah, they need to stop putting little signs on saying what things do. Like, remember the disable gravity?
You mean so that it would confuse others who were on there?
Yeah, so anybody watching wouldn't go, hey, you turned the transporter on.
Well, they never expect stuff like that. That's part of the funny thing about Starfleet, is they never expect that somebody else has taken over the shuttle. Like how people have deleted logs and pointed shuttles into the sun to destroy
That's
them.
right,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, we have to put the instructions right on the panel about how to do it. Click here.
There should be a protocol of Miles has a safe word on the shuttle that shoots everybody other than the Starfleet officers.
That's a great idea. I think we've talked about this before. Like there should be some special code word that somebody could shout out and it would fill the room with gas and knock everybody else out.
Yeah, exactly.
Miles pulls a piece of equipment out of the floor, moves a wire quickly that causes a minor explosion behind the soldier. When the soldier looks the other way, Miles quickly beams himself off the ship. Very slick. The soldier fires too late, and Miles has escaped. He's out in the woods now with nothing but a tricorder.
You can do a lot with a tricorder.
Oh, yeah.
This conversation was interesting. You made the point just a minute ago about Miles going into soldier mode.
Yeah.
This scene was really displaying that. Miles and the Jem'Hadar were very much soldiers.
Yes.
Miles, almost at his core, goes back to that military view. He's my enemy.
Yep.
And then the Jem'Hadar being in exactly the same place.
Same way.
It showed you this parallel between the two sides.
Right. Yeah, the soldier says something like to Miles, like, you don't like the doctor helping us. And Miles is like, no. And the soldier's like, I don't either.
Right.
So yeah, they're kindred spirits.
Yeah.
Well, Julian continues to be confounded by the leader's ability to survive without the drug. Garanagor is convinced the answer is on this planet. Julian wonders if maybe he was never addicted to the drug. Maybe his DNA mutated randomly and he just never had the addiction even though he took the drug. One of the other soldiers comes in to report that Miles escaped. The soldier accuses Bashir of lying, saying he's not going to help them and there is no cure. But Garanagor says there is a cure. The soldiers are losing faith, and this guy is the second in command, so it's clear that it's happening to the entire unit.
Yeah.
He says their leader has become soft and weak because he doesn't want to kill these Starfleet dudes.
Yeah, he says he's becoming like a human, soft, weak, and inferior. Here's that inferior thing again.
Nothing good has ever come from that, from somebody thinking that someone else is inferior to them.
This does, to a large extent, confirm what Julian was saying, though. There is something about this Jem'Hadar. It's not a ruse or a deception. Goran has something different about him.
Oh, he's definitely different. Absolutely. The fact that he hasn't killed Bashir or Miles makes him different already. And every time Miles does something, he just says, oh, take him back to the cave. And that's making the soldiers crazy. They don't understand why they're keeping him alive.
Well, I guess because their normal thing is if you oppose the Jem'Hadar, they just kill you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess that was the writers trying to put into your head that maybe this guy was lying to Julian earlier?
I guess so. They definitely need to do that. That's important in the story, that you're not 100% sure.
Yeah.
We go back to a dark Quark's, and the smuggler has come to make a deal. When Quark puts the bag of latinum on the table, in comes Worf with his phaser drawn. Trafficking in illegal merchandise is a felony, he says, and he grabs the bag of money. But that's no ordinary bag. Welcome to Deep Space Nine. That's Odo. And Worf has now interfered in Odo's investigation.
Well, I haven't seen Odo as a bag in a while.
No, we haven't.
He was a backpack in Second Skin, and then there was the Cardassians carrying the bag of latinum, and he was the bag.
Yeah.
It's one of his go-tos, obviously.
He does like being a bag.
Yeah.
Well, Odo is planning to infiltrate the entire Markarian smuggling operation, but now Worf has ruined the whole thing. They shouldn't give this whole plan away in front of the criminal. Didn't you think that was weird?
Yes.
The guy's just sitting there listening to the whole thing.
Yeah, I believe the term is monologuing.
Yeah. Well, Worf is like, you could have told me. And Odo says he doesn't report to Worf, and he also doesn't like to spread the word of his investigations. But maybe Worf now is going to learn to stay out of Odo's way.
Well.
Maybe. Only maybe. Back to the planet, and Miles sets up a trap, knocking out one of the Jem'Hadar so he can get his weapon.
That was very Home Alone.
Yeah, where he hits him in the head with a tree branch. That was pretty funny. He sneaks in to rescue Bashir, who doesn't want to go. They argue, and Bashir tells Miles to just go. So Miles dramatically destroys his work and forces Julian to go with him. Garanagor appears, and at gunpoint, he marches them to the runabout and tells them to leave. He says the supply of white is going to run out tomorrow. Then they run into the Jem'Hadar soldier, second in command guy again, and Garanagor just shoots him. He says it will be better for the soldiers to die quickly in battle rather than slowly as the drug runs out. Bashir thinks he should come with them, but Garanagor tells Miles as a soldier to explain to Bashir why he can't. And Miles says he's their commander. They trusted him. He can't leave them. Bashir looks sadly after him, but they get in the runabout and leave.
In this situation, my money is on Goran.
Agreed. I think he'll survive. And I hope we see him again, but I don't know if we will. In Sisko's office now, Worf comes in to confess about how he interfered with Odo's investigation. Sisko's already heard. He tells Worf word gets around on the station. It's one of the things you have to get used to. It's just like such a small town.
I thought it was pretty decent of Odo to actually leave that part out of the official report.
Well, he may have been manipulating the situation a bit too. Maybe he's learned that, oh, now I've got something I can use against Worf. I don't know.
That's a possibility, but I guess he doesn't know Worf, because of course, Worf, from all the character that's built up, would completely admit to his actions, which he does.
That's true, because I imagine if Snodgrass had done the same thing, he would have put Snodgrass in the report.
Well, Snodgrass would have deserved it. Remember what Snodgrass's first name is?
What is his first name?
Suck Up.
That's funny. Sisko says that Starfleet officers often have trouble learning the unofficial rules on the station. Worf says on the Enterprise he always knew who the enemy was. And Sisko says the station has more shades of gray, and Quark definitely is a shade of gray. He says Quark lives by a set of rules, and if you understand the rules, you'll understand Quark. And then he tells Worf he just needs time and he'll fit in.
Again, Sisko came to this station and just dropped right in. Sisko is not just a political animal, he's a chameleon. He can fit in where he needs to. This is what I think is the core of the character and why you would use Sisko in this kind of situation. Maybe this is overanalysis, but I assume part of this assignment was the Federation thought they could get Bajor in very quickly. And they were sending Sisko because he could cajole, manipulate, glad hand the Bajorans into joining the Federation. Maybe they even thought he wouldn't be here that long because he'd wrap this thing up and be on to the next one.
Okay.
I'm writing my own canon here.
I mean, I see your point, and you've said this about Sisko for a long time, which is that he is the perfect person for this situation. So I imagine that anytime something like this happens, it feeds your narrative there that, see, he's exactly what he's supposed to be.
Right.
He knows exactly how to deal with these situations. I think from a leader's point of view, he had to understand that Worf coming in cold from the Enterprise, or really from any Starfleet ship, was landing somewhere different. This is the highest ranking person, because it's somebody who's coming right into ops to work with them, that he's brought in. So I think he could have spent a little bit more time with him to help him acclimate, because he had to know that Worf was going to be a black and white kind of person. And there's just nothing black and white about anything they do. It's all shades of gray.
Yeah, I think so much of Starfleet is that black and white.
Yes.
Especially with the order that has to be maintained on a starship.
Yes, but it's not that way here. He should have had this conversation sooner rather than waiting until something went wrong. Although at the same time, that is sort of how everybody learns on the station. They get mixed up with Quark, or they get mixed up with Odo, and then they find they don't know anything really about what's going on.
Right.
So I guess this was just his rite of passage. Well, now the runabout comes back through the wormhole. And as they're approaching the station, Miles tells Julian that he could bring him up on charges. But Julian says that's not really his style.
Or Miles could say, I could get you court-martialed for treason against the Federation.
Well, maybe, except for if you remember the title of this episode is the Hippocratic Oath. So I think they're making a point that the doctor has taken an oath to do no harm and to always help those who are in some kind of medical need. So he was living up to that part of the oath. I don't know how that works in Starfleet.
That's a good point. I don't know either. And there haven't been any real indications of what the limits are.
Right. Well, Miles says he's sorry that he had to destroy Julian's work, but Julian says you didn't have to. You made a choice to disobey orders. He said, you condemned those men to death. Yes, I did, Miles says, but it was the only way to save your life. At least try and understand that.
Miles is very focused on that one thing.
He is. Yeah. Well, survival. That's important in war.
That's true.
Then they talk about how neither one of them wants to play darts tonight, because I guess it's their normal dart night. But Julian says, maybe in a few days. And then he kind of smiles. And I thought, are we over that already? That was quick. Because then the episode just ends.
Rather an abrupt ending.
Yeah. Well, what's your over-analysis of this episode?
Oh, well, there's a few things here.
Okay.
First of all, I think it's a huge strategic oversight by Miles and Julian. For a start, you have one member of the Jem'Hadar, a senior officer, obviously, who is trying to break away from the Founders and the Dominion. This has the potential for being a huge split, both in the Dominion and their power. Imagine what would happen if all of a sudden their warriors start thinking for themselves. Their mindless drones start looking at the big picture and go, hey, why am I dying and fighting for people who don't really care about me?
Right.
Granted, the other side of this is the risk of, if you remove their need for the Ketracel White, do they go off on their own and start founding their own empire? Also, maybe it's the Ketracel White that is actually driving the aggressive behavior of the Jem'Hadar. It wasn't just that they're engineered to do this.
Agreed.
I felt that was part of the hint of this.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm surprised they didn't think that they should just load up Odo in the runabout in a couple days and go back over there and see if that guy is still there.
I know, right?
Bring him back or, start working with him. What an opportunity for him to meet one of the founders and maybe really change the course of his life.
Yeah, and it wouldn't even necessarily be dangerous for Odo because they view him like a god. We saw what happened to that young Jem'Hadar, how he reacted. They are utterly subservient to the founders.
Well, my point was to go back in 2 days when the only way anybody would be alive would be the guy who didn't need the drug.
Oh, that's also a very good point.
I took the conservative approach. But yes, the same thing is true if they were still alive and Odo turned up there.
But I'm still surprised that the huge strategic advantage they could gain from this, they weren't able to actually comprehend that, especially Miles.
I agree.
Moving on from that, shouldn't a research team be going back to that planet? Because you have a Jem'Hadar on there who potentially could cooperate with you in return for you getting his people off the drug.
This is a great opportunity.
Exactly.
I mean, did they tell anybody what happened? They must have written a report, right? And we just decided to not do anything? Ugh, I don't know. It's very confusing. At the same time, I understand they're trying not to poke the bear.
Yeah.
They're trying to stay under the radar with the Jem'Hadar, but if you actually went back and he was still there and the rest of them had died, I mean, that's your great opportunity. But I suppose it's not likely he would still be there if he did actually survive.
Right. He does have a ship. He could get off planet.
Right.
The other thing from what you just said there, it could be the Federation doing that. Oh, well, this is violation of the Prime Directive. This is an internal Jem'Hadar issue.
Oh, true.
We're not going to get involved.
Well, it depends. Remember, we'll break the Prime Directive if we like somebody. So,
okay.
If we really like this guy, we might do it.
Yeah.
But it's a good point. That would be a violation.
Yeah, theoretically. This is kind of a split or a theological split in the Jem'Hadar between those who would believe in the founders and continue to follow them and those who would split away from them.
Well, there's that episode of TNG where there's that whole planet of people who are hooked on a drug that the other planet is able to provide. And Dr. Crusher wants to get them off the drug. Picard is like, oh, no, it violates Prime Directive.
Yes, the moral cowardice.
Come on. Of course, he had another thing going on because Picard always had another thing going on. But to me, that's similar here. If you were going to say, oh, no, you can't do it because of the Prime Directive. I mean, come on. They're genetically engineered to be addicted to a drug.
I look at that race as already having been abused by the founders.
Yeah.
Anything you're doing is helping them.
Right. Oh, it's always murky, this Prime Directive stuff, when you know that somebody is being taken advantage of. Because somebody's always being taken advantage of.
I would agree. Okay, next thing. Odo is doing that petulant, pouty thing again, isn't he?
Yeah.
We've seen this before.
Yeah.
When he feels like his toes are being trodden on.
I know, he's such a baby.
And on top of that, I'm going to hold Sisko partly responsible for this. As a good manager, he should be holding a meeting with Worf and Odo and explaining in great detail what Worf's role is in this thing. And then basically asking Worf to please not get involved with what Odo's up to. And being his commanding officer, Sisko could effectively just put the hammer down on this one and go, this is Odo's world. You don't get involved with it. The other side of it is, as the manager, maybe explain to Odo, give Worf some leeway. You don't need to tell him everything that you're doing. I guess part of it is Odo wouldn't trust Worf.
Right.
But if Sisko said, give Worf a little trust. He's, this very solid Federation officer. Talk to him. He'll be able to help you. He's less of a hindrance. He could be an asset, but it's not his job. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I just don't know if Odo knows how to work that way.
Yeah.
He's not that great of a team player. He always feels threatened when somebody might be stepping on his toes, God forbid. And I've certainly worked with people like that, and they can have moments where they're part of the team and where they contribute as if they're part of a team. But in the long run, they're really difficult to work with because they're mostly paranoid and looking out for themselves, and they're not looking out for the team. So it can be really difficult. I don't know that you can sit with the two of them and have a productive conversation. I almost feel like you'd have to have that conversation first with one of them.
Probably Worf.
And then you maybe could bring them together.
Yeah.
You bring them in a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then you sit them together. And, maybe that would work. But I also think he could just have talked to Worf and just told him, Odo frequently uses Quark. And,
yes.
he's doing something now. I just stay out of it. This is what I want. This is the reason that I allow Quark to be here. And this is Odo's responsibility. Just have a conversation like that. You don't have to be ordering him to do something. You just let him in a little bit on what's going on rather than waiting for him to stub his toe and then be like, yeah, that's what it's like on the station. It's like, ugh.
Well, you could point out that technically Odo is a Bajoran employee. He's working for the Bajoran side of things.
Yes, that's true. And also, whatever Quark is doing, he's not doing it on a starship. Though I guess Worf's problem here was that he was committing a felony. I love how they use the word felony. Like, what does that even mean in space? But because they're not in Federation space. So does a felony really apply? I mean, who wrote the felony? I don't know.
Yes. Where does this fall under the legal spectrum?
Yeah, it's all very hazy, as usual. I think Worf needs a hobby. He's got to get out of Quarks.
Yes.
No good's going to come from him sitting in Quarks watching whatever he's up to.
No.
Or the other option is he should give himself to Odo and be like, hey, you want somebody to help you watch all the surveillance tapes? I'm here for you.
Oh, yeah. Worf would love that.
Yeah. I'll take notes. Oh, no. Odo doesn't like records. That's right.
Yeah. Odo doesn't like taking logs.
He could definitely tell Odo that anytime there are Klingons on the station, I will help.
Yes.
Although now the Klingons aren't coming by to visit the bar anymore right now.
That's true. It's probably a loss of income for Quark as well.
I don't know. Didn't he say something about they break more things than they pay for?
They always break the holosuites, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the management part wrapped up.
Okay.
Next point, I think Miles was just saying that he wanted to keep Julian alive to justify his own behavior.
In that last scene?
Yes.
Was that just an excuse for his behavior?
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. Maybe it was, but maybe that's the reason. Like we said, he is a soldier and he went into survival mode and he was doing everything he could to get off that planet.
You're right.
And I think to him, what he was doing made perfect sense. And I think about all the times on this show where the team has gotten into some kind of trouble or been trapped on a planet like in Paradise, and they've done everything. Miles in particular does everything to get them off or to get them out of the trouble.
Yeah.
So he was just behaving that way. The difference here was he was in conflict with a member of his team about what the actual mission was. So was he making an excuse? I don't think so. I think it was actually pretty much in line with what Miles does normally.
Good point. I think Miles saw everything he was doing as justified by that war footing mode.
Right.
He was certain they were going to kill them and he needed to get himself and Julian out.
Yes. The two of them at this point, they're not seeing this from the same perspective.
Oh, no, completely.
And this is why I said at the end, did we get over it already? Because really, this should be a pretty serious conflict for the two of them. Not only did Miles just completely disrespect his orders, but he didn't understand at all what Julian was saying or what he was trying to do. And I think they're both right in that Star Trek way.
Yeah.
You know, Julian is definitely oversimplifying the situation, but he's really putting that Starfleet ideology into play.
Yes, completely. Absolutely.
But he's also putting himself and his teammate in mortal danger.
Yeah.
So he's not seeing the whole picture either.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Julian and Sisko here and how much they have in common when Sisko was standing up for himself in Paradise.
Oh, right.
But then there's the other example of when Sisko risked everything to rescue Odo in the Die Is Cast.
Yeah.
When Miles sees that, he's doing the same thing. He's risking everything to get them off of the planet and to save
Julian.
His crewmate. So he doesn't see that changing a couple of Jem'Hadar is really going to turn the tide of anything. He's just thinking of survival. But from the other side, Julian's thinking about the Starfleet ideal. And it's just really interesting.
Well, I think that's why I'm surprised neither of them can really see the strategic advantage of this. And Miles is extremely focused on the tactical.
I wonder, again, is that what they're trying to tell us about Miles?
Yeah.
Is that that's what he's good at and that's what he's good for. That's certainly the point of his position generally. He's not really meant to think strategically.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is very much it.
Okay. They stay in boxes a lot of times, don't they, on Star
Trek? Oh, they do.
Yeah, that's...
Yes.
Stay in your box, people.
And on to my final point.
Okay.
Orders from a commanding officer. The men may trust their officer, but it's absolutely not necessary for the job. The job is to follow those orders. If you only followed the commanders that you trusted, that would not be an effective way to run an army. I think what I'm saying is that the men need to respect the chain of command, not necessarily the individual officer as a person.
I agree in principle, but not being in the military, I find that a little difficult, that all you can do is follow orders.
Yeah.
It's hard to relate to. But I think back to one of those TNG episodes I was watching to sort of catch up on Worf. And there's the episode where Data doesn't follow the order. He's off running one of the ships where they're trying to catch the Romulans in cloak.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And Data doesn't follow orders because he has an idea. And he goes off and kind of does something else. And then he's able to discover the cloaked ship because he does that. And then at the end, he goes in there to see Picard and he's just like, well, you can write me up. I didn't follow orders. And Picard is like, yeah, I could do that, except Starfleet doesn't want people who just blindly follow orders all the time.
Yeah.
And he's like, what you did actually saved us, right? You were the one who found that ship. So congratulations. And so obviously, if that's the norm, you have anarchy. And
yes.
You need the military to work in a certain way. I contend that this isn't the military. I know people who like to argue with me about that, but I don't look at Starfleet as the military because that doesn't make sense in my life. That's all. People can look at it however they want.
Well, I would agree with that. The whole point of militaries is so that discipline works and you can order people to do things that are not in their best interests, but are in the interests of the campaign and the war and whatever it is you're trying to do. So that concept that Miles brings up of that they trust him, maybe in this very limited context.
It's like the ultimate process, where people just have to follow it, but the process isn't always the answer. People are always the answer. Sometimes they're a bad answer, but they're still an answer.
Well, and I would contend that, especially in a military that is organized like the Jem'Hadar, it would be completely order-based.
Oh, yes. When it's something that brutal, yeah, it would have to be.
Right.
Because it's out of fear, and that's not what Starfleet is.
And not just necessarily fear, conditioning too. And whatever their dogma is that they're taught.
Yes, you're right. Yep.
And I think my final thing, as is tradition.
Yes.
So, Goran.
Yes.
I assume he was some kind of genetic throwback. Here's my headcanon.
Okay.
I assume the Jem'Hadar naturally produced that enzyme. They keep on calling it a drug, but...
It's an enzyme.
Julian also calls it an enzyme.
Yep.
I assume at some point that was just completely natural for the Jem'Hadar, and the founders deliberately removed their ability to produce it, giving them control, and maybe in higher doses it made them more aggressive, etc. So maybe there was a flaw in the cloning of Goran, so he went back to a more original version of the Jem'Hadar and was able to produce that himself. So like Julian alluded to, it wasn't really the planet, it was that he was a genetic aberration that was like the original Jem'Hadar.
Well, it seems that that's what Julian was saying.
Yeah.
Or is it possible that they will all eventually evolve to this?
Oh, that's a good take, that he could have been an evolution.
Right.
Also possible. I shall add that under the canon notes.
Okay. Okay, any other final?
And with that wraps up the overanalysis.
Okay.
I think I have everything covered there.
We covered my one overanalysis point in talking about the conflict between Miles and Julian.
Yeah.
So I'll just go to women in the future. And there's no women in this future, which is a bummer. Kira had the opportunity to talk to Worf about Odo as well. And, why he's trusted and how he will do something in his own way and not to rush him. Like, help him understand the lay of the land a little bit. I mean, that's what good teammates do. So that was kind of a bummer. But I get it. It was for the story. It needed to be that way for the B story.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I wouldn't see Sisko skipping giving Worf a full briefing on how the station worked. I would see Kira as the person who would be the one doing the informal, whereas Sisko would probably give you the official briefing.
Right.
Kira would be the one saying, look, Odo just has this is how he works. He gets Quark to do things because he's caught Quark doing something else illegal and is making him help.
Yeah. Or even if they let Worf watch some of the old episodes.
Oh, yeah.
So he could see.
Yeah, they could just go and get the tapes and cue them up. This is what Odo did here.
Yes, you could read some reports, but yeah, we have a precedent of being able to watch parts of episodes. So I think they should just show him a couple of episodes of when Odo did something similar to this and saved the day.
Yeah, watch out for bags.
Exactly. Bags, carts, paintings, rats.
Yeah, strictly speaking, he was a backpack in Kira the Cardassian.
That's right. He hasn't been a rat in a long time.
Oh, yeah. That was an old favorite.
All right, let's move on to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. A great Star Trek episode. It balanced idealism of Bashir, that is very much Trek, with a real practicality that was Miles.
Yeah, I agree. Thumbs up. And it felt like a very Star Trek episode where both sides kind of made sense. Both sides were wins and both sides were loses.
Yeah.
And yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I did also enjoy the B story, even though it was a little bit goofy. And I felt like some leadership could have maybe stopped some of those things from happening. But I actually still kind of liked it because I think Odo lives in his own little world. And I think he really loves using Quark in every way that he can. And I'm sure he quite enjoyed that. And if he did spread that information around, then his power would fade, at least in his mind, because he's built that all up in his head. So I did like it.
Yes. And another important thing is Odo would not trust Worf.
No.
Certainly not at the beginning.
Yeah,
just bringing this person in, no chance.
Although he has a real problem with gold uniforms. And now that Worf has a red uniform, maybe he's not quite as paranoid about him.
Oh, yeah.
But still, I don't know. Odo's funny.
So the Jem'Hadar have those like personal invisibility cloak things, those little shields, and they sort of disappear. Do you think Snodgrass has one of those, or did he take one from the Jem'Hadar?
I don't know where he is all the time. All right, I think that wraps up season 4, episode 3. I understand that we are episodic, but I still feel bad that we forgot all about what happened last week in The Visitor. It didn't come up this week.
Yes.
But that is the nature of 90s television.
That episode is done and gone. Everybody forgets about everything.
That's right.
Yeah, remember Kira was over Bareil in, it was a week? Was it 2 weeks?
Well, she never talked about him again. It was like 10 episodes later when you finally saw that, oh, maybe she wasn't over him, but then she was over him by the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Episodic stuff, it sort of drains the emotion of things.
A little bit, yes.
Okay, well, come back next week for season 4, episode 4. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own over-analysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. You can check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback there for individual episodes, and you can also listen to the other podcasts in our network, like the Lower Deck podcast that's going on right now.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinged Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.